Harlem, New York. 11:47 p.m. Friday, September 22, 1956. The autumn air hangs thick over Lenox Avenue like a funeral shroud. Streetlights flicker through the haze of cigarette smoke drifting from the after-hours joints, casting sickly yellow pools on wet pavement. The smell of fried chicken and bourbon seeps from the Red Moon Club, mixing with the metallic scent of coming rain. Inside, the jukebox plays low and mournful, Billie Holiday's voice cutting through the murmur of late-night business. 23 people sit at scattered tables, but every eye tracks the man in the corner booth. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, 49 years old, sits motionless in a charcoal suit that cost more than most Harlem families earn in 6 months. His hands rest flat on the mahogany table. He hasn't touched his glass of water. For 14 minutes, he's been staring at a young dealer named Tommy Quick Daniels, who counts money under a dim lamp near the bar's back wall. Tommy is 24. Ambitious. Reckless. 3 hours ago, he collected the weekly take from 8 street corners in Bumpy's numbers operation. The total should have been $1,247. Tommy delivered $1,197. $50 short. When questioned by Bumpy's bookkeeper, Tommy looked the man in the eye and called the count accurate. He suggested, with a smirk that lingered too long, that maybe the old-timers were losing track of their own money. Maybe it was time for sharper minds to handle the books. The words hung in the air like cordite after a gunshot. Bumpy said nothing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply looked at Tommy for 8 seconds, nodded once, and walked away. That silence wasn't mercy. In Bumpy's world, silence was a death sentence being written in real time, signed and sealed before the condemned man even understood what he'd done. Now, at 11:48 p.m., Tommy slides the stolen 50 into his sock and laughs with his crew about how easy it was, how the professor didn't even notice, how maybe Bumpy Johnson's legendary attention to detail was just street mythology. He orders drinks with stolen money and tells anyone who'll listen that the old guard is slipping. He doesn't see Bumpy rise from the corner booth, doesn't notice the 3 men in pressed suits who enter through separate doors. Doesn't understand that his laughter is being cataloged, his words recorded in the mental ledger of a man who built an empire on the principle that disrespect has only one price. Everything you have, everything you are, everything you'll ever be. By 3:17 a.m. Sunday morning, 39 hours and 30 minutes from this moment, Tommy Quick Daniels will discover that stealing $50 from Bumpy Johnson wasn't about the money. It was about sending a message written in blood and delivered with surgical precision to every corner, every numbers joint, every after-hours club from 110th Street to 155th. The price of $50 and a disrespectful mouth would be calculated in ways Tommy never imagined possible. The story of how Tommy Quick Daniels lost everything is a warning that history has tried to hide. If you enjoy these deep dives into the underworld, you can support the channel by buying me a coffee using the link in the description. Your support keeps these investigations alive. Now let's go back to Friday, September 22, 1956. September 22, 1956, 8:15 p.m. Tommy Quick Daniels steps out of his Studebaker on the corner of 125th and 7th Avenue, the autumn wind carrying the smell of roasting peanuts and exhaust fumes through the cooling air. Someone's radio plays Sam Cooke from a second-floor window, the melody drifting down like a funeral hymn. Tommy adjusts his fedora and checks his leather satchel, empty now but destined to carry the mathematical precision of Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson's empire. 8 designated corners. 8 collections. 1 assignment. Gather every dollar that belongs to the machine and deliver it without error, excuse, or delay. Bumpy's numbers operation moves like precision clockwork across 147 blocks of Harlem. Money flows upward through a pyramid designed with military discipline and banking standards. Street-level runners collect bets from apartment buildings, barbershops, and after-hours clubs. They pass cash to collectors like Tommy who consolidate 8 corners worth of action. Collectors deliver to counting houses where bookkeepers verify every dollar against handwritten ledgers. From there, money moves to lieutenants, then finally to Bumpy himself. Every transaction recorded, every discrepancy investigated. The system has operated without significant theft for 6 years, 2 months and 14 days. Tommy has been a collector for 18 months, earning $75 weekly. Good money for 1956. Enough for a decent apartment and his girlfriend's happiness. But for 6 months, resentment has been growing inside him like a tumor. He's calculated obsessively. In 6 months, he's personally handled $47,000. His cut? $1,950. He watches thousands flow through his hands weekly, money that moves upward to men in tailored suits while he walks dangerous streets at night. The mathematics of exploitation, he tells himself, ignoring the mathematics of protection and organization that makes those collections possible. By 10:47 p.m., Tommy has completed 7 collections. His satchel holds $1,000 in mixed bills, carefully recorded with times, locations, and runner names. The 8th and final stop brings him to a dimly lit doorway on 142nd Street, where Samuel, a 63-year-old runner with arthritic hands, waits with a brown paper bag. Samuel counts money into Tommy's palm with deliberate slowness, $247 in singles, 5s, and 10s, worn bills carrying the fingerprints of half the neighborhood. Tommy counts twice, his fingers moving through the currency with practiced efficiency. Then something shifts. Among the street-worn bills sits one crisp $50 note, clean compared to the weathered currency surrounding it. In that moment, Tommy makes a calculation that will cost him his life. His fingers close around the 50. He slides it into his jacket pocket with smooth motion, a theft practiced in his mind for weeks. Payment for services rendered, he tells himself. Compensation for risk and loyalty that goes unappreciated. The justifications come easily, as they always do for men about to destroy themselves. At 11:22 p.m., Tommy climbs stairs to the counting house on 132nd Street, a second-floor apartment above a closed laundromat. Vincent, Bumpy's bookkeeper for 22 years, sits at a wooden table under harsh fluorescent light, 3 decades of experience in his tired eyes. Tommy places the satchel on the table. Vincent empties it with methodical care, his fingers moving with concert pianist precision. He counts once. Pauses. Counts again. His expression doesn't change, but something in the air shifts like barometric pressure before a storm. Vincent looks up with the sad recognition of a doctor diagnosing terminal cancer. He's seen this particular tragedy before. Tommy forces his face neutral as Vincent recounts a 3rd time. The numbers don't align. $50 short. Instead of admitting error, Tommy doubles down. He suggests Vincent miscounted. Implies that age is affecting the old man's accuracy. The room goes cold. 4 witnesses stop their work. Vincent closes his ledger with deliberate care, reaches for the telephone, and speaks 4 words that seal Tommy's fate. We have a discrepancy. September 23, 1956, 7:33 a.m. The telephone rings in Tommy's 3rd-floor apartment with mechanical persistence. He reaches across his sleeping girlfriend, lifts the receiver with fingers already sensing disaster. The voice belongs to no one he recognizes, flat and professional as a coroner reading cause of death. Mr. Johnson wants to see you. Wells Restaurant, 10:00 a.m. Don't be late. The line goes dead before Tommy can respond. He sits on the mattress edge, understanding that the $50 bill in his jacket pocket has just purchased a conversation he cannot survive. His morning routine transforms into desperate theater. Tommy stands before the bathroom mirror, rehearsing explanations with the intensity of a condemned man practicing final words. He tells his reflection that Vincent miscounted, that the old bookkeeper's eyes are failing, that honest mistakes happen in complex operations. He practices looking sincere, injured by false accusations, righteously indignant. The mirror shows him a 24-year-old wearing confidence like an ill-fitting suit. He convinces himself that words can repair what theft has broken, that Bumpy Johnson is just another businessman who can be reasoned with, negotiated past. The delusion feels necessary for psychological survival. At 9:57 a.m., Tommy pushes through the door of Wells Restaurant on Lenox Avenue. The breakfast crowd, 43 people consuming eggs and coffee and morning conversation falls silent with synchronized precision. Forks pause midway to mouths. Newspapers lower. Every eye tracks Tommy's walk toward the back booth where Bumpy Johnson sits reading the Amsterdam News, a cup of black coffee steaming untouched beside his folded hands. Bumpy gestures to the seat across from him without looking up. When he finally folds his newspaper, his expression carries no anger, no threat, nothing but surgical curiosity. He orders Tommy breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, as if this were a social call between colleagues. He asks about Tommy's family, his health, his ambitions for the future. The questions arrive with methodical gentleness, each one designed to lower defenses before the examination begins. Vincent arrives carrying his leather-bound ledger with religious reverence. He sits beside Bumpy and opens the book to pages documenting 6 months of Tommy's collections. His finger traces down columns of numbers, perfect accounting stretching back to March 1956. Not one discrepancy. Not one error. Then he turns to last night's entry, where the mathematics break down, where $50 vanishes into the gap between what should be and what is. Bumpy studies the numbers with jeweler's concentration. Then he asks one simple question, delivered in a voice barely above a whisper. "You calling Vincent a liar, Tommy?" The question hangs in the air like cordite smoke. Tommy feels the trap closing. He should apologize, confess, beg for mercy. Instead, cornered pride makes him suicidal. He suggests that perhaps new leadership would run things more efficiently, more modernly. The words tumble out with increasing momentum, desperation disguised as confidence. He implies that Bumpy's methods are outdated, that younger men understand the changing streets better, that the organization needs fresh thinking for a new era. Bumpy listens without interruption, his face revealing nothing. When Tommy finishes, 8 seconds of absolute silence follow. Then, Bumpy stands with deliberate calm, reaches into his pocket, and places exact change for the breakfast on the table. He walks toward the door without speaking, without looking back. Tommy exhales, thinking he survived. He doesn't notice the 2 men in pressed suits who rise from separate tables and follow Bumpy out. An older patron named Blue leans across from the adjacent booth, his whisper carrying the weight of prophecy. "You just ordered your own funeral, young blood." Hope that 50 was worth dying for. September 23, 1956, 2:15 p.m. Tommy steps onto familiar corners and feels something he's never experienced there before. Distance. Men who usually greet him with easy nods suddenly find urgent business elsewhere. Women who once smiled now busy themselves with imaginary tasks. Eyes slide past him like he's become transparent, a stranger asking directions rather than the collector who's carried their secrets for 18 months. The psychological warfare begins with surgical precision. Tommy drives to his first collection corner on 128th Street, finding another runner already stationed there. A younger man with the same leather satchel, the same quiet authority Tommy thought he'd earned. At his second corner, the barbershop owner won't meet his eyes. By the third stop, a runner shrugs and delivers the message with rehearsed indifference. "They reassigned us. Management said you was on vacation." No explanation. No apology. Just systematic erasure. His 8 corners, the foundation of his income and identity, vanish one by one with administrative efficiency. Each location now belongs to someone else, the machine operating flawlessly without him. By 6:30 p.m., Tommy understands the scope of his destruction. He feeds nickels into a payphone on Lenox Avenue, calling numbers that picked up reliably for months. Now they ring endlessly or connect to voices claiming ignorance. Suppliers who extended credit suddenly require cash up front. His network hasn't abandoned him, it has evaporated. Desperation drives him to his girlfriend's apartment on 139th Street, where he keeps emergency cash hidden beneath a loose board under the kitchen sink. The door is unlocked. Inside, everything appears untouched except for the empty space where his safety net used to be. On the counter sits a note in neat handwriting. Borrowed. Like you borrowed from the house. Management. No threats, no profanity, Just professional correspondence explaining cause and effect. Tommy rushes to his Studebaker parked outside. The windshield remains intact, the body unmarked, but all four tires sag against the asphalt, deflated with precision. Under the wiper blade, a crisp $50 bill flutters in the evening breeze, accompanied by a message written in block letters, payment for services no longer required. They have dismantled his life using access, information, and logistics. Smart violence. Bloodless, but devastating. Evening falls across Harlem like a judge's gavel. Tommy walks Lenox Avenue like a ghost haunting his own existence. Men who once depended on him for collections cross streets when they see him approaching. He tries approaching other numbers runners, men loosely connected to rival operations. They listen just long enough to deliver their verdict. Can't do business with you quick. You marked. House said no. That means everybody says no. By 11:47 p.m., exactly 24 hours after sliding that $50 bill into his pocket, Tommy stands outside the Red Moon Club, staring through the window. Inside, Bumpy Johnson occupies his usual corner booth, reading a newspaper with the calm precision of a man for whom nothing unexpected ever happens. Tommy's humiliation curdles into reckless defiance. He decides to go inside, demand respect, force a confrontation. As he pushes through the club's front door, Tommy doesn't notice the three men in pressed suits who've been waiting for exactly this moment. September 23, 1956, 11:52 p.m. Tommy pushes through the heavy oak doors of the Red Moon Club, and the music stops mid-note, as if someone cut the jukebox's power cord. Conversations die mid-sentence across the room. 23 patrons freeze in suspended animation, glasses pausing halfway to lips, newspapers lowering, cigarettes burning forgotten between fingers. The atmosphere shifts from casual nightlife to execution chamber silence. Every eye tracks the dead man walking toward the corner booth where Bumpy Johnson sits reading the evening edition with the calm attention of a professor grading final exams. Tommy approaches with adrenaline and desperation driving him forward in equal measure. His voice erupts loud and aggressive, carrying across the silent room with the clarity of a public confession. He demands to know why he's been blackballed over a simple misunderstanding, why his livelihood has been systematically destroyed without explanation or trial. The words tumble out with increasing volume, each sentence another demonstration of his panic disguised as righteous indignation. Bumpy doesn't look up from his newspaper, doesn't acknowledge Tommy's existence. His eyes continue scanning the print with methodical precision, turning pages with deliberate calm that transforms the newspaper into a weapon more devastating than any gun. The studied dismissal cuts deeper than any verbal assault could manage. Tommy gets louder, his voice echoing off the pressed tin ceiling. He calls Bumpy washed up, a relic clinging to outdated methods while younger men understand the modern hustle. Claims the streets have passed him by, that respect must be earned rather than demanded through reputation alone. He's performing now, aware of his audience, trying to salvage dignity through volume and bravado. Still, Bumpy reads, lifts his coffee cup, takes a measured sip, places it back on the saucer without sound. Each ignored word becomes another demonstration of Tommy's irrelevance, his transformation from collector to ghost screaming into the void. Then, Tommy makes the ultimate mistake. He reaches across the mahogany table, grabs Bumpy's water glass, and slams it down hard enough to splash liquid across the pristine white tablecloth. Two things happen simultaneously. Bumpy's hand shoots out with cobra speed, clamping around Tommy's wrist with iron strength that makes escape impossible. At the same instant, three men in pressed suits enter through both doors, moving with synchronized precision that suggests military training. Bumpy finally looks up, his eyes cold and devoid of anger, filled only with judicial assessment. He speaks in a voice barely above a whisper, yet every syllable carries to the room's farthest corner. You took $50. You lied to Vincent. You disrespected my organization. Now you put your hands on my table. You understand what happens next? Tommy tries to pull away, panic finally piercing his rage. He cannot. Bumpy's grip anchors him to his fate with unbreakable certainty. Bumpy continues, his voice steady as a metronome. "The $50? I spend $50 on cigars. But you stole it. Then you lied. Then you suggested I'm weak. Every punk in Harlem is watching to see what I do to you. This isn't about money anymore. This is policy enforcement." He releases Tommy's wrist with dismissive finality. Tommy stumbles backward, rubbing circulation back into crushed bone. Bumpy nods once to his approaching men and delivers the death sentence with bureaucratic efficiency. Take him to school. Teach him about respect. As the three men close formation around Tommy with unhurried professionalism, Bumpy adds one final instruction, his tone carrying the weight of institutional policy: make sure the lesson is permanent. And make sure everyone sees the grade. September 24th, 1956, 12:47 a.m. The black Cadillac winds through empty streets toward the Hudson River, passing warehouses that squat like tombstones against the night sky. Tommy sits between two men in pressed suits, their silence more devastating than any threat. The 20-minute drive stretches into eternity, broken only by the engine's steady hum and the distant sound of tugboat horns on the river. When they reach a corrugated metal building surrounded by broken streetlights and industrial decay, the men escort Tommy inside with professional courtesy, as if delivering fragile cargo requiring careful handling. The warehouse interior stretches vast and empty except for a single wooden chair positioned under a hanging bulb that casts harsh shadows on concrete walls. They sit Tommy down and leave him alone for 19 minutes. The psychology of fear operates more efficiently than immediate violence. Anticipation becomes its own torture, allowing imagination to construct horrors far worse than physical pain. Time crawls. Water drips somewhere in the darkness. Tommy's sweat pools on the chair seat beneath him. When the door opens, a man named Sonny enters carrying himself with the disciplined calm of a surgeon preparing for routine procedure. He's worked for Bumpy Johnson for 19 years, approaching violence with the detachment of an accountant reconciling ledgers. No visible weapons, no shouting, just professional explanation delivered in a voice that echoes off concrete walls. "You stole $50, Sonny says, stepping into the light. So we're collecting 50 pieces of interest. Piece by piece. This isn't anger, Tommy. This is accounting. Mathematics. Action and consequence. The systematic torture begins with methodical precision. This is not random violence born from rage, but calculated punishment designed to send a message that will echo through Harlem's streets for decades. Sonny focuses on Tommy's right hand first, lifting it with clinical inspection. "These are the fingers that touched Mr. Johnson's money," he explains with educational patience. The first finger breaks with a sound like dry wood snapping. Tommy screams until his throat goes raw. Sonny waits for the scream to subside before asking, "You understand why this is happening?" When Tommy doesn't answer immediately, Sonny repeats the question with patient insistence. Each finger receives identical treatment, identical inquiry, forcing acknowledgement of the transaction. Pain becomes currency, each fracture a payment against a debt that can never be settled. While this methodical destruction continues, another man prepares a note at a nearby workbench. Tommy watches through tears and shock as neat block letters form on white paper, 50 short. Paid in full. EJ. The preparation is deliberate, showing Tommy that his death is already documented, processed, filed away. He witnesses his own obituary being drafted in real time. When the systematic breaking is complete, Sonny gives Tommy one final opportunity. He leans close, wiping blood from Tommy's face with a clean handkerchief. "Apologize," he whispers, "not for the money, for the disrespect. Acknowledge who you crossed. It's a chance to die with some measure of dignity, to accept the hierarchy he tried to subvert. But pride is a terminal condition. Even destroyed and dying, Tommy spits blood and curses, refusing to bend. Some men cannot be taught. Some lessons end only one way. The execution is swift but symbolic. 2 shots crack through the warehouse air. The first drops Tommy backward, chair and all. The second finishes what the first began, administrative and precise. Sonny retrieves the $50 bill from an envelope and places it carefully in Tommy's cooling hand, curling dead fingers around the currency. The note is pinned to his shirt with a straight pin, positioned over his heart, neat as a court document. As they position Tommy's body in the alley behind the Red Moon Club, Sonny checks his watch under flickering streetlight. 3:17 a.m. 39 hours and 30 minutes. Right on schedule. September 24th, 1956, 6:45 a.m. A city street sweeper named Marcus Washington rounds the corner behind the Red Moon Club, pushing his cart through morning fog that clings to Harlem like funeral gauze. He finds Tommy's body positioned against the brick wall with deliberate precision, the $50 bill clutched in rigged fingers catching first light, the note pinned to his chest fluttering in the autumn breeze. Marcus doesn't touch anything. He's lived in Harlem long enough to recognize institutional violence when he sees it. He walks 3 blocks to a payphone and makes the call that brings 2 patrol officers who arrive, take photographs with clinical detachment, and ask no questions beyond what's required for paperwork nobody will ever read. The note and the $50 bill become instant legend before the blood dries on pavement. By the time the coroner's wagon arrives, the story has already spread through barbershops, after-hours clubs, and numbers joints across 147 blocks of Bumpy's territory. The narrative distills into 7 words that will echo for decades. Quick Tommy came up 50 short, paid in full. The psychological impact ripples through Harlem's underworld with seismic force. Every runner, dealer, and numbers operator immediately checks their own books with obsessive precision. Men who've operated honestly for years suddenly recount their collections 3 and 4 times, terrified that some forgotten error might seal their fate. Collections become flawless overnight. Theft rates, already minimal under Bumpy's systematic oversight, drop to absolute zero. The lesson carves itself into collective consciousness deeper than any law or moral teaching could penetrate. A young dealer named Raymond finds $40 on the sidewalk near 135th Street that afternoon. He stares at the bills for 17 seconds, considering the groceries they could buy, the rent they could cover. Then he walks directly to the nearest counting house and turns the money into Bumpy's organization with trembling hands. "Found this on Lennox," he explains. Thought it might belong to the house. The bookkeeper nods, makes a note of Raymond's name, and the story spreads as quickly as Tommy's death. Honesty becomes currency more valuable than cash. The systematic nature of Tommy's destruction transforms into a teaching tool throughout the underworld. Older criminals explain to younger ones exactly what happened, step by step, turning Tommy's final 39 hours into cautionary parable. The precision of it, the mathematical inevitability, the way Bumpy never raised his voice or showed anger, all of it becomes educational material passed down like scripture. Bumpy never speaks about it publicly. Doesn't need to. The message is carved in stone, written in blood, and filed in the collective memory of every criminal who operates within his sphere of influence. 3 weeks later, a new runner named James approaches Vincent at the counting house on 132nd Street. His hands shake as he places money on the table. "Sir, my count came up $30 short. I covered it from my own pocket, but I wanted you to know there might be a problem with one of my corners." His voice carries the weight of a man confessing potential execution. Vincent looks up from his ledger, studies the young man's face for 8 seconds, then nods with something approaching paternal approval. "Honesty is expensive, son. Keep the 30. Consider it a bonus for integrity." That evening, Bumpy sits in his regular booth at the Red Moon Club, reading the Amsterdam news with the same methodical attention he showed the night Tommy died. The same coffee steams untouched beside his folded hands. Tommy Quick Daniels might never have existed. Tommy stole $50 and lost his life. But the real price wasn't paid by Tommy. It was paid by every criminal in Harlem who thought about crossing Bumpy Johnson and decided the cost was too high. In Bumpy Johnson's world, $50 wasn't currency. It was a test. Tommy failed that test, and his death became the textbook that taught every other criminal in Harlem the most important lesson of all. Respect isn't negotiable, loyalty isn't optional, and the price of betrayal is always the same. everything you have, everything you are, and everything you'll ever be. September 24th, 1958. 3 weeks before the trial verdict, Bumpy Johnson stopped thinking like a defendant and started operating like an executioner, not of bodies, but of reputations, accounts, and careers. The basement of a Lenox Avenue brownstone filled with 5 people who looked nothing like criminals. No muscle, no guns, no street reputation. Thomas Everett wore wire-rimmed glasses and had spent 19 years examining corporate tax returns for the heirs before retirement. Patricia Delacroix operated a photography studio specializing in surveillance work that divorce attorneys paid premium rates to acquire. Jerome Banks had worked as a filing clerk for the FBI's New York field office until 1956, memorizing case structures and evidence protocols. Samuel Chen managed accounts for 3 Chinatown import businesses and understood how money disappeared across borders. At the head of the table sat Mabel Carter, known in quiet circles as Red Ink. She had spent 12 years at Pemberton and Associates, the white shoe accounting firm that managed financial arrangements for judges, politicians, and old money families who needed their wealth structured creatively. She possessed a photographic memory for numbers and an encyclopedic understanding of how wealthy men hid money from wives, tax collectors, and federal investigators. When Pemberton fired her in 1955 for being too curious about client irregularities, she took nothing except what lived in her mind: account numbers, routing codes, shell company structures. The architecture of judicial corruption memorized down to the penny. She spread financial documents across the table like evidence in a murder trial. Whitmore's gambling addiction manifested in Atlantic City casino markers totaling $41,000, paid off in irregular cash deposits that exceeded his annual salary of $11,000. His wife Margaret shopped at Bergdorf Goodman and Saks Fifth Avenue, charging amounts that should have bankrupted a federal judge. The consulting fees appeared quarterly, deposited into Chase Manhattan account number 8477429, registered under Margaret's maiden name, Pemberton. The amounts correlated precisely with major Harlem property acquisitions by Hutchinson Development. $15,000 appeared 6 days after the Cotton Club raid. $22,000 arrived 2 weeks after the Paradise Theater closure. The pattern was systematic, documented, and absolutely criminal. Bumpy listened without interruption, his face revealing nothing. When Mabel finished, he spoke quietly, his words carrying the weight of strategy refined over decades. "We don't fight this in court. We fight this in his bedroom, his bank account, and his reputation. The law is just another gang, and I'm a better boss. Courts operate on rules written by men like Whitmore. But money, marriage, and reputation follow older laws I understand better than any judge." The operation began with precision. Patricia rented a room at the Carlisle Hotel with sightlines into Suite 407, where Whitmore met his secretary every Tuesday afternoon. Her camera captured moments through inadequately curtained windows that would end a marriage. Samuel traced the developer payments through 4 shell corporations. Jerome obtained Whitmore's complete financial profile using techniques he learned filing FBI reports. Thomas calculated exact tax liabilities on unreported income, preparing documentation that would interest the Internal Revenue Service considerably. Bumpy made a decision that confused his street lieutenants. He instructed his lawyers to mount a deliberately weak defense. The conviction needed to happen. Whitmore needed to feel victorious, powerful, untouchable. The trap worked best when the predator believed he'd won. In the Harlem basement, Bumpy held an 8x10 glossy showing Judge Whitmore and his secretary in an embrace that would require explanation Margaret Whitmore would never accept. His lieutenant Marcus asked when they would move. Bumpy checked his watch, calculating the hours until his sentencing. 47 hours after he gives me 20 years. Let him feel powerful first. That's when we take everything.